Hello, everyone, and welcome to the last mini saga before we embark on the great journey that is the Steinitz saga. It is the secret match between Svetozar Gligoric and Robert James Fischer. Fischer played this match, sort of a training session of 10 games to prepare for his upcoming sort of a World Chess Championship rematch against Boris Spassky that was to take place in St. Stefan in Montenegro in 1992. And the match started on November 2nd, 1992. Against Spassky, so the games between Fischer and Gligoric took place sometime before that. Some were played in Belgrade in Serbia, some were played in Saint Stefan, waiting for Spassky's arrival. So it took time to finish all of them. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to cover all 10 games, but I will cover the more interesting ones. This is one of them, and featuring the King's Indian defense. I think as they played 3 games featuring the King's Indian defense and Bobby Fischer was black in all of them, they were sort of a preparation for the rematch against Spassky. So it's not really a match between Gligoric and Fischer, it's more of a training session. And it's a funny story how we actually got to see those games. Now, Bobby Fischer had a storage, and his friend by the name of Bob Ellsworth was making sure that everything is taken care of, that the storage is being rented, that the payments were being made. But in 1998 in California, in Pasadena, the storage had a shift in ownership. Ownership changed, and then Bob unfortunately missed some payments, or for whatever reason he didn't make the payments, and they were confiscated. Everyone knew who Bobby Fischer was, of course, and they were auctioned off. And Bob, I imagine he was very sorry for that, so he tried to buy most of it back. He spent some $8,000 buying it back, and he actually did purchase most of it back, including these games that were played in secret against Svetozar Gligoric. And interestingly, even though Gligoric could have, he could have gotten a lot of money for it, he could have auctioned it, he could have done anything, he kept it secret and never, published them or told anyone about it. And the first time we actually saw them was in 2009. But we're going to get to that because, Bobby Fischer's friend, Bob Ellsworth, managed to buy them back at an auction, and he sent all of them, some 12 boxes of Fischer's belongings, to Hungary. That was Fischer's residence at the time, and they remained in Fischer's possession until his death in 2008. And then they were sort of inherited by Bobby Fischer's good friend and chess colleague Pal Benko. And I think that's kind of fitting, that everyone knows that Pal Benko gave up his spot, so Fischer could go to the Palma de Mallorca Interzonal, even though you had to actually play the 1858 U.S. Chess Championship in order to qualify. Fischer didn't play. He, for some reason, didn't want to play. He said, okay, it has to be a double round robin. A single round robin is not enough because everyone can have a fluke or something like that. And he just said, okay, I'm not going to play. But, they didn't have anyone to send who actually had a chance of winning and qualifying for the candidates. So Pal Benko said, I'm not going to play. You, Fischer, go. Fischer went to the Palma de Mallorca Interzonal, crushed everyone of the candidates, and then, of course, defeated Boris Spassky in Reykjavik in 1972, becoming world champion. So after Pal Benko acquired those items, he sold them to a collector, probably one of the biggest collectors in the world, by the name of David De Lucia, who then published a book a year after Bobby Fischer's death in 2009, and that is the first time we saw some of these games. 3 of them were published in that book. It was called Bobby Fischer Uncensored, and we got to see these 3 books. Then again in 2012, a day before Bobby Fischer's birthday, on March 8th, chess historian Edward Winter published the 4th game, and then the next book, a sequel to the Bobby Fischer Uncensored in 2014, Bobby Fischer Triumph and Despair. All 10 games were published, and that is how we have them now, basically. So this is the first game that we're going to cover, and it's I'm not going through any order because we don't know in which order they were played. They're categorized by openings, and this is one nice game featuring the King's Indian. The games were played via with a chess clock in the same time format that was going to be used for the rematch against Boris Spassky, and Fischer even patented this clock. You gained additional time when you made a move. It is the same system we use today. Later on, it they started mass producing them, and Fischer said that okay, they tricked him. He didn't get his fair share of basically his invention. But okay, we're not gonna focus on that during this. We're gonna focus on the games and on the match. And regarding Svetozar Gligoric, he was already Fischer was 49 when this was played. We all know he was 29 when he won the World Chess Championship, and this is 20 years after the events of Reykjavik in 1972. So he is now 49, and Gligoric is 69. But even at 69, he was still very, very impressive and very active in chess. For example, in 1990, he played the Yugoslav Championship. Later on, he also played in 2005. He played in 95 also. I think he played Reykjavik, the Olafsson Memorial Tournament in Reykjavik. Then he also played the Tigran Petrosyan Memorial some years after that. And he was actually active in the chess world, playing until 2007. Basically until the death of Bobby Fischer. Then he retired, and then he passed away in 2012. But yeah, interestingly, this year in 2005, David De Lucia, who published those books, who purchased one of the biggest chess collectors ever, donated most of it to the Cleveland Public Library as they were celebrating 100 years of their existence. And now you can, if you're, for example, from Cleveland, you can go there and you can see all of those nice things, not just from Fischer, but also from other important chess people and chess events, and basically just really, really famous chess memorabilia. So yeah, let's check it out. This is one of the games. Gligoric with white opens with pawn to d4, and of course Fischer goes for knight to f6. He will go for the King's Indian defense, and Gligoric was also one of the best players of the King's Indian defense, so it makes sense to test it out against him. We have pawn to c4 and pawn to g6, knight to c3, and bishop to g7. We have pawn to e4 and pawn to d6. So at the time was still pretty standard theory. Knight f3, castles kingside, bishop to e2, and pawn to e5. So it was theory back then, and it's theory even nowadays. Castles and knight to c6. We have pawn to d5, knight to e7, and knight to d2 by Gligoric here. The other popular moves are knight to e1. This is by far the most popular today. You're making room for that f pawn to start marching forward. Also, b4 is very popular. You know that in King's Indian, black plays on the king side, white plays on the queen side. So knight to d2 is Gligoric's weapon of choice. We have pawn to a5. Now Fischer stops pawn to b4 and a3. Gligoric prepares pawn to b4, and now bishop to d7. Nowadays, knight to d7 is more popular, but Fischer's bishop to d7 also makes sense. You are fighting against that pawn to b4. For the moment, it's still impossible as the rooks are not connected and the queen is not defending the rook. But you could go rook to b1, and then pawn to a4 is very strong. That bishop there, adding more support to that a4 pawn, really makes it problematic for white to execute pawn to b4, which is what you always want to do. So he prepares it with pawn to b3 first. Now you can play rook to b1 and pawn to b4, but Fischer now strikes with pawn to c5. And nowadays, c5 is more popular, and not nowadays, but in modern chess, for example, Shirov played pawn to c6 in many games. Rajabov played it in many games, but he opts for pawn to c5, which is a favorite of players like Vasily Ivanchuk, of Boris Gelfand, and even John Nunn, who played it quite a lot, who even made published his great book on the King's Indian defense, which if you play the King's Indian defense, you have to have the book by John Nunn. And okay, now it's a bit of a problem to execute pawn to b4. You have the b4 square nicely defended. So rook to b1, pawn to b6, and okay, that's all there is to it. Pawn to b4. You had to waste a few more moves, but you did get it in. A captures on b4. We have a captures and bishop to h6 now by Fischer. Asking, okay, what do you do? I'm putting pressure on your knight. The knight usually moves away and the bishops get traded off, but the c4 pawn could become weak at some point. So here there are some games. For example, queen b3 is a known move. It was even played in 1990, so they were still following theory of chess back then. But here we have b captures on c5 by Svetozar, and it is now as of move 15 that we have a completely new game. Okay, b captures on c5, we have knight to b3, and bishop captures on c1. We have queen captures on c1, and knight to c8. Okay, the knight is coming to b6. Fischer wants to put pressure on that c4 pawn. The rook might come somewhere a2, a3, a4, all depending on what Svetozar does with the knights and with the queen. And here you definitely have options with white. You could go queen to b2. You could play something like pawn to f4. Let's say captures. You put pressure on the knight. Let's say king to g7, h3, stopping knight g4. And okay, it's a nice game, but okay, you do give up that a3 square, and it's definitely playing for 3 results. So Svetozar played rook to a1. He first wants to take care of Fischer's rook on the a file, and Fischer says no thank you, I'm not interested in a trade. Goes rook to b8, puts pressure on the knight on b3, rook a3, and now rook to b4. Fischer finds a way on how to go after that c4 pawn. He's going to go knight to b6 next and put pressure on the c4 pawn. We have queen to e3, knight to b6, and now knight to d2, adding a defender to c4. Okay, perfectly fine. And here Fischer plays knight to g4, attacking Svetozar's queen. And the question is where to go. You could go queen d3, you could defend the pawn, or you could play actively the way Svetozar did. Now I'm going to show how you could actually play queen to d3. Okay, you nicely defend the c4 pawn, and now after, let's say, queen g5, it looks scary, but you can defend. You capture the knight, and after bishop captures, you just go king to h1. And not a lot black can do here. It's still, definitely a very, very dangerous position. Let's say rook to b2, you put pressure on the knight on d2, rook a2, you defend, you offer a trade. Let's say captures. Let's say rook to a8 goes after the knight. You return knight to c3, and okay, perfectly fine position. A move like rook to a3, well, it's nice, just queen c2, and nothing really happening there. No one's getting checkmated, so it can be played. So if anything, it's an early draw with queen d3. But Svetozar not interested in that. He wants to fight, plays bishop captures on g4, bishop captures, and now pawn to f4, where Fischer again has options. So he can capture on c4. That's not a problem. But if he captures the pawn, let's say captures, and he allows pawn to f5, then it's tricky. His bishop, Fischer's bishop, is now in danger. h3 and g4 will win the bishop. And if he opens up his king, then okay, he's up a pawn, but his king is a little bit loose. Definitely can be played, but Fischer doesn't like it. Fischer plays e captures on f4 first, queen captures on f4, and now rook to b2. And now it's attacking chess all around. Gligoric plays rook to a7, puts pressure on the f7 pawn, and Fischer plays bishop to d7. And it's this could have been the critical position of the game, but Svetozar did not find the most precise continuation. I don't know. You have to see like really, really deep in order to find the best continuation for white here. But that's why we're here. So what would you play here? You're playing Bobby Fischer. You have the white pieces. What would you play? So the only move that gives white advantage is pawn to e5, but I will show you what you have to see in order to play it. So rook captures on d2. Okay, that's the first move you guys checked, probably. Queen captures on d2, knight captures on c4, connecting with the queen and the pawn. And now after queen to h6, again, only move that gives white advantage, you're going to play knight captures on e5. Okay, knight to e4, again, only move that gives white advantage, you're threatening knight f6 check, followed by queen to h7 checkmate. So knight to g4 has to be played, and now, okay, the queen is attacked, f6 is being covered by the knight as well. You have to go back with the queen to f4, only move that gives white winning chances, and now pawn to c4. Black starts pushing the pawn, and the only way you have is a rook captures on d7, queen captures, and now you play queen captures on g4. A temporary queen sacrifice, and after queen captures, knight f6 check, nicely connecting with the king and the queen, king g7, and knight captures on g4, and you have this position where white is up a knight, but Fischer would have 2 extra pawns, and the passed c pawn, so white is the only one that can win this. Whether you would win it against Fischer, that is, probably Gligoric would, but yeah, I mean, it's still, you have to play this. This can last for 100 more moves. So after bishop to d7, and congratulations, if you saw all of that, then you deserve to beat Fischer in 1992. But this was some 20 years after he probably did not play a single game of regular chess. He played a lot of Fischer random, but he didn't really play regular chess. Okay, knight f3, Gligoric prepares pawn to e5, and also he wants to play queen h6 and knight to g5, and just checkmate Fischer on h7. But now, and also he's giving up the c4 pawn, so Fischer actually has quite a lot of options here, and capturing on c4 is not a mistake or anything. It's actually the best move recommended by the engine, and then the idea is that after queen h6, preparing knight g5, you can play pawn to f6, and then Gligoric was probably preparing pawn to h4, pawn to h5, you have the rook on a7, so it looks very nice. It's it's manageable, but it looks a little bit easier to play with white. But Fischer said no, just pawn to f6. And he says, well, your knight is now just silly on f3, and your pawn on c4 is saying you should just go back, knight to d2. And even though knight to d2 is the best move, we already know that grandmasters never admit that their idea was flawed. So he's not going to do that. He plays queen captures on d6. He grabs the pawn, and now he runs into a most unfortunate series of events. So what would you play here? While I give you a couple of seconds. Of course, rook captures on g2 check. And no, Svetozar did not blunder a queen. He merely traded pawns. Of course, he's not going to capture the rook if you capture bishop h3 check and the queen is lost. So king to h1, and now Fischer goes back. Rook c2 puts pressure on the knight. Knight to d1, and now bishop to h3, attacking the rook and offering a queen trade. So Svetozar trades queens. It is the best thing he can do. Captures, and now comes knight to e3. You could also go rook to g1, for example, rook g1, knight captures on c4, but, it's still very, very hard to defend. Fischer gets the passed c-pawn. He has the rook, knight, bishop gathering around the white king. It would be very difficult. So he played knight to e3. He offered the rook trade, but he missed a most devious idea that Fischer employs now. Bishop captures on f1, knight captures on c2, we have knight captures on c4, and knight to a3, offering a trade of knights. Okay, Fischer goes back, knight to d6, he wants the knight here to help out with the advancement of the c-pawn, and also it's a nice blockader of the d-pawn. f6 covers e5, so he doesn't have to worry about Gligoric's e and d pawn. So Svetozar goes pawn to e5 just to activate his pieces, and Fischer goes bishop to e2. And this is where things become incredibly interesting. You should go king g2. You should go king g2, and then after captures, no, obviously not there. After captures, you will capture, and after captures, okay, Fischer is pushing for the win. You might save it, you probably will not, but that was your best hope. Gligoric played knight to g1, and this is now a big problem because Fischer plays. Well, Fischer found such a beautiful move that it's the only move that gives him the clean win. So have at it. Can you spot it? While I give you a couple of seconds. So the move is bishop to d3. And it's not to control the knight on a3, if you're wondering about that. It's actually even more devious. The point is, if Gligoric captures on d6, then Fischer has bishop e4 check. And the king and knight are in a terrible position here. You have to give up the knight first, and then after king g1, just bishop captures on d5. Fischer would be up 2 pawns. He would also win the d6 pawn, and then just advance the c pawn, the f pawn, and this would be a very, very clean win. So Gligoric tried knight h3, and now Fischer plays f captures on e5, knight to g5, and pawn to h6. We have knight e6, rook to c8, now putting the rook behind the passed pawn, as you always should. Rook to g7 check, we have king to h8, and rook to d7. Attacking the knight, we have knight to f5, and pawn to d6. Gligoric starts advancing his passed pawn, but Fischer does so as well. Pawn to c4, knight to d8, now with some ideas of knight f7 check, and here you have to be extremely precise. Bishop to e4 check by Fischer, king to g1, and now there's only one way to achieve a clean win without messing around. Have at it. Again, while I give you a couple of seconds. Of course, bishop to d5. Fischer always loved his light square bishop. Here it helps him finish the game, and with bishop to d5, there is just nothing more to be done here. The reason for that is that if you play pawn to c3 right away, then you have problems. So then knight to f7 check, and look at this, king to g8, rook to a7, and now after pawn to c2, you just give up the knight. Knight captures on c2. Bishop captures, pawn to d7, attacks the rook, and after rook to f8, you can even play rook to c7 with rook c8. So you would have to play bishop to a4, and now, okay, rook to c8 will be, not rook to c8, queen d8 will be played, or rather pawn d8 promoting to a queen, captures, and now you have this position that will be a draw. It's bishop and knight with 3 pawns versus knight and rook with 1 pawn. This would fizzle out in a draw. After bishop to d5, there is nothing more to be done here. Knight f7 is no longer an option, and now the c pawn is just unstoppable. There's not even a useful move that you can make here. If you try something like knight to b1, pawn to c3 can be played, so the pawn to c2, pawn to c1, that's not really doing anything. Other moves will not help you. You can't really go rook to c7. If you go rook to c7, you hang the knight. So there's really no move that you can try here. So Gligoric definitely had a chance here. Fischer played this bishop back to d7. Had he found pawn to e5, it would have been at least interesting if you, if you find all of that, then you deserve the win. Gligoric did not find it, and then Fischer just took over. So this is one of the games from the training match of 1992. Fischer preparing for his World Chess Championship rematch against Boris Spassky in Saint Stefan, and we're gonna cover that as well. There are many books have been written on that. Gligoric was also the main commentator for the match, and we're gonna be using a lot of his commentary as well. So hope you enjoy it, and sort of a mini sequel to the Bobby Fischer saga. If you haven't seen the Bobby Fischer saga, do check it out. I have it covered quite extensively, all the way up to the World Chess Championship match against Boris Spassky, and this is sort of the continuation after missing for 20 years. Really hope you guys enjoyed it. If you still haven't, do try out Lotus Chess. It's the best app to improve your chess. First link in the description below teaches you how to play fighting chess like Bobby Fischer did, and whoever tries it says it's absolutely the best, so, have at it. I would like to thank Phil Bauer, Fischer Exteriors, Tafaz Vaniguaru, Alexander Schaefer, and Milos Knežević for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.